today's episode, we'll be exploring the question, how do you learn to value yourself? How do you go from not valuing yourself at all to valuing yourself? I'm guessing if you're like me or most people, issues like self-esteem, self-worth, self-efficacy, and self-confidence are something that at one point or another in your life you may have struggled with, or perhaps are still struggling with to this day. This was the case for my guest today, Aisha Barnes, who struggled immensely in her earlier years, both with valuing herself and always trying to be a people pleaser. She would try and please everyone except for the one person that mattered most in her life, and that was her. Her lack of valuing herself even led to her developing an eating disorder at an early age. At one point, she devalued herself so much that she would make friends by buying things for them, doing unnecessary or over-the-top favors, and even lying about herself and her life so that she would seem interesting and someone who was worthy of their friendship. Finally, one day, she said, "Enough is enough." And she began the slow but tangible process of turning her life around and begin to value herself. How did she do this? And if these same issues of self-worth, self-confidence, and self-efficacy are challenges for you, how can you overcome them and turn your life around? Today, we'll hear Aisha's story and how she went from surviving to thriving and turned it all around. She is now a freedom coach helping other women discover their self-worth, author of the ebook, How to Own Your Past and Live Life by Your Rules, and can be reached via her website, www.aishabarnes.co.uk. Okay, hi, and welcome again, everyone. Coach Brad here, and as always, the Be Well, Be Safe, Be Happy, Eat Ice Cream podcast. I'm so excited today because coming to us from London, England, we've got Aisha. Aisha, welcome to the podcast today. How are you doing?
Hey Brad, I'm doing really well, thank you. Thanks for having me on here.
Well, absolutely. Thank you for being here. You have got an incredible story, and I talked a little bit about it in the intro, but once upon a time, you were this, I'll say, lack of confidence, lack of self-worth,
Mhm.
didn't appreciate yourself, didn't value yourself, and you managed to flip that all around and someone who was very confident now thriving. You've got an incredible website, and I've seen a lot of your posts on Tony Robbins. So we want to dive into this question today. How did you learn to value yourself? How did you turn all this around? So Aisha, take us back to the beginning, your story a little bit, and let's just go from there.
Um, yeah, so I would say as a small child, I had quite a vibrant personality. I would say I was quite a confident, bubbly kind of kid. And so it really surprised me that through my sort of teenage years and the second part of my primary school years, I found it really difficult to adjust to life. And a lot of that was to do with, for me, moving around quite a few times during that time. So, for example, I can remember at age 10, I had three different schools just in 6 months. And it was extremely difficult for me to build any security to find out where my place was, on a small scale within a classroom, within my peer group, but then also just in general, like what kind of interest do I have? Like every different school, I started to adopt like a different personality depending on what kind of people I was around, because I was just felt so desperate to fit in straight away. And I think from having that instability, and every time that I moved, it just felt like I lost touch with so many people. If I would think back to those memories and those friendships that I built, they were extremely strong at the time, and I don't have any of those anymore. And that filled me with a lot of sadness while I was a child. And it carried on in secondary school actually. And as you get older, you start to realize a little bit more about what your behaviors are and what you're doing. So I started to realize that I was lying to people. I was telling people all these crazy stories about my life, about the people that I knew, or there was always something happening in my life, because I felt like I just had to be interesting for people to like me, for people to give me attention. Um, And I think also I spent a lot of time on my own during that time. So it was kind of like 11 to 14. Um, and my parents were really busy. You know, they were working really, really hard. We had a lovely life. You know, we had a really nice house. We went on lovely holidays. Um, but I felt like I didn't have anyone in my life. And that was, wasn't really a fault to them, to be honest. They gave me a really amazing childhood. Um, but there was just something missing for me that I didn't really have. I didn't really have any friendships and great um, connections with people. It was all just kind of fleeting, and that made me really question about who I was, really.
And so all of that kind of led to you feeling like you didn't value yourself, you didn't consider
Yeah.
yourself worthy or any of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So it led me to um, be kind of desperate for other people's approval and trying to do whatever I could to have that validation that I was worth anyone's time. I would be honestly shocked that somebody would come and speak to me or
Oh,
pay me some sort of attention. And during my school years as well, I really struggled with my weight. Um, and I just really, I guess I struggled with being on my own a lot as well. And I never really said, I never really felt like I could say to my parents, oh, you know what, I'm being bullied at school, or do you know what,
oh,
like I'm really not happy. You know, I would go from the morning saying bye to them when they would leave at 7 o'clock. Then I would leave to go to school and I wouldn't speak to anyone
oh,
for like
wow.
12 hours. And I think doing that, for so many years really had a profound effect on how I viewed myself. I honestly just felt so ignored. And um it wasn't really, I always felt that it was everybody else around me, but it was actually myself as well. I was, isolating myself. I wouldn't put myself out there. I would just have that view that everybody didn't want to spend time with me, didn't want to get to know the real me. So then I started portraying all of these things that I thought people would want, but in actual fact, they didn't want that either because they saw through the lies that I was telling, and that actually was the reason why people didn't talk to me.
So you were kind of giving them a fake version of yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was, really self-sabotaging. And that kind of, every time I would move to a new school, I would say to myself, look, Aisha, you're going to do things differently this time. You're going to make friends that are going to stick this time. And I would be a sort of person that would give so much in a friendship, too much even. I mean, I would be like buying them all sorts of like
I read
sweets and
that.
like
I
any,
read that. Yeah.
yeah, just ridiculous stuff. Or it'd be like, oh, I don't know, you don't have the latest toy. Oh, I happen to have a second one. I didn't have a second one. I just went out and bought another one and gave it to them because I was just so desperate to be like that most important person in somebody's life. When actually, what I really needed to work on was being the most important person in my life and in
Yeah.
my eyes.
Well, real quick, you also we'll get to that. You mentioned you were bullied
Mm,
also throughout your childhood and in school.
yeah.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it was like continuous bullying, but I think there was plenty of times where it was either about being overweight or um, also um, growing up in a school in a few of the schools. I would say some of them were fine, but some of the schools that I was a minority in terms of my ethnic backgrounds, and that wasn't always accepted. Being part of a girls' school and um, maybe not wearing makeup or not shaving my legs, and I was, I'm Asian, so I have more hair on my body, and that was a huge deal for me. And the fact that I was bully for things that I wasn't really in control of, or I felt like I wasn't in control of at the time. I struggled with that quite a bit too.
And so this carried over into your early adult years.
Yeah, so I guess then it carried on in terms of then relationships.
Yeah. Yeah. You were in a
So
relationship that you realize now. I mean,
mhm.
looking back on it wasn't so good, but yeah, take us through that part real quick.
Yeah. I would say before that happened, my first ever relationship with somebody, which I actually haven't shared on social media yet, but I plan to because it's quite an important part that I hadn't really realized, to be honest. But the first relationship I was in, I felt that I, being so desperate for attention and love and approval and all of that, I fell kind of head over heels for this person. I was 17.
Oh, wow, okay,
And it was
young.
the first ever person that's been interested in me.
First
Um,
love.
yeah, every time it's always been me that's been crushing and I've said nothing, or I've said something and it didn't work out, whatever, whatever. But then this person, I felt like we both had a mutual connection, this, that, and the other. Um, and sort of 4 months later, I found out. Well, I decided because our feelings weren't really mutual at that point. I was like, oh, I really don't want to hurt him, don't want to break his heart, but I'm going to have to do it because I'm starting to feel like I don't feel the same anymore. And then when I did that, I he actually told me that the whole relationship was a lie, and he told me that he had chosen me as part of a game that he was playing with his partner at the time, who they had a child together, and they thought it would be fun if they could
Oh.
manipulate me into thinking that he was, head over heels in love with me, and he was just like, I can't believe you think that you're breaking up with me. Like this wasn't real. Like this whole thing. So I think having that experience really it sent me further into not trusting myself. I felt like such a fool. I felt like yeah, I felt awful about that. Um, and I think then throughout my sort of uni years, I spent time um, going a bit kind of wild, I guess, and trying to heal that wound that I didn't know how to heal by trying to make lots of different relationships to kind of prove that I was worthy enough for other people's attention. People weren't just going to choose me because I was an easy target or something to tick off the list, which has been my experience before.
So you're this young lady blossoming into adulthood and all of that. And
Mhm.
obviously, yeah, you're struggling with self-worth and self-value. So was there a tipping point for you that I read in your story, enough is enough and things started to turn around? What was that tipping point?
Yeah, so the tipping point for me, so I found another partner in towards the end of uni, which is my second relationship. Um, and I think I've tried even harder to make that relationship work. Uh,
We all do.
yeah, and I was still young. I was 21 and I wanted I hadn't had the security of being in one place and all of that. So I think I was so desperate for that. Um, and at the time, my parents weren't kind of they weren't happy in their relationship. They were living separately at the time and now they're back together. But so it was a very insecure time for me. Um, so I kind of rushed that whole relationship. We settled down really early. We moved in together within 6 weeks. We bought a house together. We were just getting ready to retire at like 23. It was crazy.
Wow.
Um, yeah. So and then I had a job as well. I was a qualified teacher. And that was exhausting me emotionally. My relationship was draining me emotionally. I was isolated from all my friends. I wasn't allowed to really have friends and social occasions. Um, and I just like I came home from work one day and I was just looking around at my house. I was looking around at my life, and I realized that everything that I had built here was not what I wanted. Like the whole thing. Like even me deciding to be a teacher, I didn't make the decision because I necessarily really wanted to. I felt like it was going to be easier for my partner to deal with because I would be home more. And just all sorts of things that I was just I couldn't continue with that lie anymore. I just had to get out of the whole situation.
And yeah, you were making decisions for other people, not for yourself. Sound like,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean,
So
I was allergic to dogs and I had a dog. And it would be
Oh,
staying in my room and I would be ill and all of that. And I was just like, oh yeah, that's fine. Well, it's making my partner happy, so I will put up with that. But it just, yeah, things that I mean, I never said either. I never said the things that were I was unhappy about. So that was the other problem, that I always expected my partner to know, or to have it kind of in an easier way. And really taking, having that time apart from him, um, allowed me to take responsibility for those decisions, really, and not feel like, that nobody actually really forced me to do anything. I just responded to the situation, and I didn't share how I was feeling. So I can't blame him for things that
mm.
happened to me. Like, I was there too, and I didn't say.
So you said you were around 23 years old at the time then, and you kind of had this
Mhm.
realization that, hey, I'm not being the person I want to be or should be, and I don't have the life that I want to have, and you realize that. And so what were your next step forward then? How did you begin to turn it around and all of a sudden literally fall in love with yourself and the person that you are now?
Oh yeah, that
It's
that was
another
such
story,
a
huh?
yeah. God, it was such a great journey. I mean, I started off, as soon as I sold my house. I wanted to live on my own. I've always been quite independent, despite being um, so kind of attached to wanting to make people happy and things like that. I always valued my independence. So I moved into a house share in London again, and I remember being in the kitchen, and I was even just scared to make noise. I think I dropped a fork and I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And I was in my own kitchen and there was nobody there. So I went from being that kind of apologetic about just existing to now, where I freely can talk about how I feel, what I think, without kind of holding back. And it's not to say that I don't filter what I say. Yeah, I still want to communicate in a respectful and kind way. I haven't gone, I appreciate people that can communicate like that, but I know that that's not my style. Um, but going from that, I had to just really, um, really explore what it is that I liked to do and just go from there. So I started off with interests. Um, and things that I'd always wanted to do but never got a chance, or been too scared to do or try. So I think I started netball as a club. I was always great at school, but because I moved around, I never really got a chance to fulfill that properly. Um, so I did that, and that felt really good. And I ended up actually meeting a really good friend of mine now, who I've stayed friends with. And she was actually my very first friend, that I have been able to maintain throughout, like after my relationship. And it just kind of went from there. Just kept pushing, kept trying, kept just seeing what else I could do, and it became more fun in that respect. It became more like, overcoming challenges wasn't kind of fearful anymore. It was like, oh, okay, what can I try next? Like, oh, how about this? Let me just see what that's like. Let me just try this class, or why can't I do that? And it then started becoming such a good habit that I was getting into. And it's just propelled me forwards, in ways that I never would have imagined. I was quite happy to just stay as I was, because it was so comforting to stay with what you know, right?
And so you started to basically expand your comfort zone then. You started trying all these things that you were interested in but could never do before. And you started to, yeah, basically expand your comfort zone. And then did that start to build your self-worth and your self-confidence?
Yeah. And
Okay.
the other thing that was really important for me was to challenge my beliefs, and challenge where I started putting blocks. So I realized that a lot of the things that I stopped myself from doing was because I held a lot of judgments about those things. I had a lot of judgments about myself. So there were things about the way that I looked. I didn't look in the mirror for about 2 years
Oh,
during
wow.
my previous relationship. I couldn't do it. I might have looked at my clothes in the reflection, or I might have um, maybe looked at my teeth or something when I was brushing my teeth, but I never actually looked myself in the face. I never looked myself in the eye. And
Wow.
I I didn't realize how scared I was to do that. And I was like, well, why? Why do I not do that? And I realized every time that I did it that I actually felt an extreme sadness when I was doing that. Because I really had to face some of the things that I hadn't forgiven myself for yet. So then that started my process of sort of journaling those those negative kind of stories that I had about myself, the things that I
Mm.
regretted, the lies that I told at school that I held on to. um, and I started to go through a process of forgiving myself, and telling myself that that's all you knew at that time. There's no other way that you could have done it because it's already happened. Um, and being able to let those things go then helped me to try new things and make new mistakes and be okay with making those mistakes as long as you keep learning.
Yeah, and basically you started to do the work on yourself, it sounds like. You started to challenge some of your old beliefs that you had and some of your old stories that you had.
Yeah.
And for lack of a better word or phrase, I guess you looked yourself in the eye literally with your stories and
Yeah.
beliefs, and you took ownership of them. And I think that's really key and important. A lot of people are still looking outward to try to fix what's going on with themselves and their lives. But you were smart enough to realize, oh, I need to challenge my own beliefs and establish new beliefs and new stories. And now look at you today.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think even then the next step was kind of for me about even just thinking about the things that I find frustrating, the things that sort of trigger me. And I'm not a perfect human being and never will be. So there will always be
Welcome
things,
to that club.
that
Yeah.
just right, like they just annoy the hell out of you.
Yeah.
Um, and when I actually unpick some of those things, so like for instance, I really struggled with people who were kind of quite negative and complaining all of the time. And then I had to just kind of really understand what that was about. Why is it that I didn't like that? Um, and what I came to was that I didn't like it because that's kind of what was going on in my head. And it was like I already had enough of that noise, so I couldn't
Yeah.
handle other people bringing that noise to me too. So it wasn't necessarily, yeah, I've got to kind of get annoyed at that person. That person's got to stop what they're doing. It's more like, well, how can, that person's going to continue to do that regardless. So how can I manage myself so that I don't feel like I'm being sort of negatively affected by that, or I don't feel like I have to help that person or fix what's going on for that person. I can still be, I can still be secure in myself here without kind of morphing and kind of trying to take on other people's problems.
Yeah, yeah, it's hard to take on other people's. We have enough of our own sometimes to deal with.
Totally.
You mentioned just a few minutes ago that you were not able to look yourself in the mirror, except for maybe your clothes or something for what, 2 or maybe 3 years. Where are you at with that today? Can you look at yourself in the mirror now? You're smiling
Yeah,
pretty amazingly. So
yeah,
I have to
yeah.
say yes, yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, for me, I make sure that I do it every morning. I have a bit of a ritual about what I say to myself in the mirror because
Oh, okay.
um, so I make sure that I pick out something about myself, whether it's the way that I look or the way that I'm feeling, something positive. And then there's always going to be something that I'm like, ugh, don't like, a spot's come up or, you
Yeah,
got bags under your eyes, whatever it
sure.
is. And I say that to myself as well. I was like, I see you there, but I'm okay with you being here today. So I'm kind of like I say one positive thing, accept one negative thing that I've seen and I can't ignore. Um, and then I give myself like a little bit of a positive kind of pep talk, I guess, and just say, um, what do I normally say?
Yeah, I was gonna say, would you be open to sharing like maybe one of these
Yeah,
positive statements you tell yourself? Yeah, I'd love to hear it.
yeah. Normally, I just say like, Today's going to be awesome. You've totally got this. Like, come on, let's go. It's always like I like to get quite kind of pumped in the morning, I guess.
Oh, nice. A little pep talk for yourself. And so
Mm.
when you say that, you're looking at yourself in the mirror. So kind of like you're looking yourself in
Yep,
the eye.
that's it. As if I'm talking to someone else, and it might sound peculiar, but I honestly feel like your inner self is someone else. It's someone that you need to connect with and communicate with directly.
And so is it fair to say, I mean, I pretty much know the answer to this question, but you're a completely different
Mm.
person today than you were in your early 20s and certainly your teen years. And real quick, also, just for our listeners, you mentioned part of your journey, you struggled with weight and weight loss and eating
Yeah.
disorder and a little bit of that.
Yeah.
I
Hmm.
assume all that's gone now too. Obviously, you've kept the
Yeah.
weight off and everything. Tell us about that part a little bit, if you don't mind.
Yeah. That part was I had a lot of shame around that,
Hmm.
to be honest, because it was something I would do in secret. So
Okay.
um, it started from a very young age, actually. It started when I was about 8, and I remember
Wow.
sneaking into the kitchen and just like eating little spoonfuls of sugar. And it kind of just started like that. And it was just like it seemed almost like a bit of a habit, like a little pick me up after school or a little something before I go off to school, something like that. Sometimes I would get caught doing it. Most of the time, kept it to myself. But it kind of escalated into um, when I spent those kind of times where I would not be talking to anyone, I'd be home on my own. I would like mix up cake mix and I would eat that, or I would mix up like butter and sugar or ice and sugar and make stuff that's really, really sweet, just gorge on it and then feel absolutely awful after. But I knew it was bad and just I couldn't stop. I couldn't stop doing it. And every time I feel really bad about myself or something happened that was overwhelming, I still had that habit of doing it. And even I think that didn't stop until I was around sort of 26, actually.
Wow.
I
Okay. Wow.
stopped when, yeah, it
What a
really,
long
there were
time.
times when I thought that it was done and I would never go back to it. But it came back at really dark times when I just felt just like I started to feel like, okay, I can't be okay with myself. I don't want to be with myself. I almost wanted to be separate from myself at times when I really hated on myself. So it's before I started the journaling and things. Um, and I think the only way that I was able to kick that and start to focus on my health was making a huge promise to myself. And I actually shared what I did with somebody else, with a friend. And that was really good because I always kept it to myself. My family knew, and they would tease me about it, like kind of it was kind of sweet teasing, but it was also like, oh gosh, it's like it is a kind of problem, and I do need to get this fixed, sort of thing. Um, but yeah, once I shared it with somebody and I said to somebody, I really want to change this. I'm going to do this and I'm going to try and focus on my health um, and those sorts of things. That's when I started to change. So I had to change my kind of what was going on in my head so
Yeah.
that I could focus on my health. I couldn't just do health because I've done diets. I've been I've been on a fat burning soup diet. I've been like on all sorts of different and like I've lost 8 kilos and then I put it all back on and lost it again and every time the thing that was missing was the fact that I hadn't fixed my mind. I hadn't fixed the negative beliefs. I still felt kind of awful about myself just because I was slimmer and looked better. Like I still felt kind of rubbish. So yeah, having those two things together made the health stuff a success, for sure.
But prior until you fixed your mind, like you said earlier, you challenged your stories and you challenged your beliefs. You would lose the weight, gain it back, and that's common for a lot of people that are in that yo-yo cycle. I don't think they still fully understand it. is that you have to fix your mind. You have
Mm.
to fix your beliefs and deal with all those beliefs. And Aisha, you've done an incredible job with that. Let me ask you this, Aisha. So you've been through the journey now. Obviously, you've been
Yeah.
through the thick of it and you've come out on the other side absolutely wonderful. What would you say to a woman or a man that is you know, at 21, 22, 23 years old, who's in the midst of this, who is really struggling with
Mhm.
self-worth and self-efficacy? What, I guess, advice or what would you tell that person?
Mhm. Um, what I would tell them is that you need to be patient with yourself. So when you're at that age, it's okay to not have everything sorted out and for every part of your life to be as you want it to be. Um, and the only way that you can get that eventual life that you want or start following your dreams is you have to literally take it one step at a time. So if there's one thing that you can change straight away, focus on that one thing. Don't kind of overwhelm yourself with all the things that you want to fix and try and fix it all at the same time, which, okay, yeah, that would be ideal. Like it would be amazing if we could just do that. But it's all about the gradual changes, and noticing those changes too. Because we could kind of make progress, but we're not actually acknowledging it. And therefore we lose faith and we might go backwards and go back to the routines that we had before. But if we really acknowledge the progress we're making and the amazing things that we're doing, even if they seem really small, like a big thing that was a huge change for me was just making my bed. I didn't make my
Oh,
bed consistently until age 25. Um, and I was really messy. And that changed very slowly for me. But once it changed, it changed for life. Like every day I make my bed, and it's not like a okay, well once you've done that, then you're on the path. But it's more just that was a symbol for me that it
right.
proved to me I can do stuff. Like I can change. I can I'm not just whatever the labels I had when I was a kid. You can be whatever you want to be, whatever you want to identify as.
You know, it's funny, a lot of personal development studies or whatnot that are coming out, they talk about making your bed every day. And one of the ways to change is to
Yeah.
start with making
Well,
your bed. It's
well,
fun. I never made my bed, I
yeah.
think, all the way through college. Or I think it wasn't until my adult years that I finally started making my bed every day. So I you have a website and an ebook also, I saw. Tell us a little bit about your website and your ebook and how people can reach you.
Yeah, sure. So I've got a website, aishabarnes.co.uk, and I coach women on a one-to-one basis at the moment, particularly women who can identify with being a people pleaser and not being able to communicate the boundaries, communicate what they want and need in their relationships, whether that's family, romantic relationships, or even at work. Um, and those are the type of women that I feel really benefit from the coaching that I offer. I'm also on Facebook. Aisha Barnes is my profile, and I've got an amazing Facebook group. It's called People Pleasers Paradise. I love alliteration, and I just thought it was the best name. So, than my bias, yeah, come and join my group. I've got loads of tips and advice in there, and I also do live training every couple of weeks in there too.
And I will certainly put links to your social media profiles and your webpage in my notes. But real quick, also, you've got an ebook.
Mm.
Tell us about that. What the title is and what that's about. And I think it's for free on your website, I saw.
It is, yeah. So I have an ebook on my website which tells you a little bit more about my journey and how I got to where I am. And it's called How to Own Your Past and Live Life by Your Own Rules, which for me just felt like that's the discovery I had that there isn't a set way to do things. There isn't a right way to do things, and I was obsessing over trying to get it right, get it perfect, when I can just make it up myself. I can
Yeah.
be whoever, do whatever, as long as I'm not harming others, harming myself. Why can't I do that? And I believe that everyone should have that same right too.
Yeah. Well, Aisha, you are a shining example of someone who can go from not valuing themselves to valuing themselves, and it doesn't happen overnight, but you can see, like you just said, that you can change. Aisha, before we sign off here, you've given a lot of good
Mm.
stuff today. Is there anything else that you would like to say that you haven't said for the good of the order, I guess, before we kind of close this out and wrap it up?
No, I guess the only thing I would want to say is that yes, I'm confident and I'm happy and I've really worked on myself, but that doesn't mean that I always feel like this. There are always going to be times where you revert back to old behaviors or something reminds you of a past trigger or a past time, and that those things are there for you to keep learning and keep growing. So I'm in no way, shape, or form just fully going on at life and just facing every fear and just doing it straight away. Like it's not like that. Um, but what it is like is that when those things happen, I'm able to get myself together and tackle those issues. And once you've done that work and when you feel secure in yourself, that's when you can do that too. So it's not like there's no problems. It's not like
Right.
there's no bad days. Like there totally are. But there are way, way less. And I've got a lot of kind of tools and things that I can do to get myself out of that. So I don't feel like going back to those really, really dark days that I had, because that's always going to be part of me. And I can't change that and I don't want to.
No, no, certainly as a health coach, I can certainly relate to what you just said. There are days, I like to use a metaphor of the weather where it's rainy and cloudy and overcast, and then
Mhm.
there are days that are just very sunny and bright, and the bad days don't last forever. And yeah, we
Nope.
learn to navigate them and overcome them. Aisha, thank you very much for being here today. I really, really appreciate it. This has been absolutely wonderful. Please,
Yeah,
please,
thank you.
so much more we could talk about. Would love to
Hmm.
have you back another time. There's so much value that you're adding to the world right now. For the listeners, thank you all for being here. I always appreciate that and like to say thank you because, again, without you, the listeners, we wouldn't have
Mm.
a podcast. So I appreciate you listening in. And as I always like to say at the end of every episode, please, if you do like this episode, please share it. We need to get this word out as far as possible. Wherever you do listen to your podcast, please hit subscribe and please leave me that 5-star review. The more, the merrier. And again, the more people can learn about this and learn about the learning to value yourself, really learning to love yourself. That's such a huge part of all of this nowadays. So
Yeah.
please hit subscribe and please leave me that 5-star review. And until next time, this is Coach Brad saying be well, be safe, be happy, eat ice cream. Take care, everyone. Thank you. We'll see you next time.